Welcome to the studio where it is kind of a mess today, but it usually is a bit of a mess, and I don't want that to be a reason to not show it to y'all anymore. So yeah, let me take you through what I've been working on. So in this video, I want to walk you through the process of making the zine, and each one is a phase of the moon with a little description of what you can do to align with each moon phase. So before we get into the weeds of assembly, I want to show you about the design. So my initial designs were made in Procreate, and I started with an 8x8 canvas and drew each moon phase in a circle that measured about 7.5 inches, I'd say. And I left room for bleed so that if I think I'm cutting this at about 7 inches, so there's room for cutting. So here I drew each moon phase as the image itself, and I wanted this to be a story that you could flip through. You'll see here that I make these files, and it's not as simple as just, printing them once you're done. And there's several reasons for that. This page is made up of two different pages. There's one page that has this and the other that has the words, and then folded together it makes the image that you saw on the screen. But this process is called imposition, and it's basically placement of how to have the zine so that when it's all folded and assembled, everything is in the right place. These zines are printed with risograph. So risograph is a printer that uses specific ink drums of each color. So this one uses blue, yellow, and black. This requires each layer of ink color to be printed on a separate layer on its own, and then the full image comes together. So it requires separating your image into all of its parts. With this image, I'd print all the blue part in one go, and the yellow in another go, and then the black on top is the final. So it's a pretty manual process, but it has really fun results. Like, I love the texture that comes through here for the blue. It's a really nice, pretty affordable way to print, especially if you're printing multiple copies as you would a zine. Alright, so now we have our final printed sheets. It's definitely not perfect. There's some ink stains here from drying time, which will happen when you have such a intense, full color touching the paper. So I think that happened, and it's okay. I'm making peace with it. I think that because I don't, have my own risograph printer, and the place I use to print at SVA requires booking print time. So that just has a lot of, you want to make the most of the time you have booked. Anyway, so here I have already, measured the halfway mark of this circle vertically by folding the paper. And here I have marks to tell me where the halfway point is horizontally. So I'm putting a little hole through here with my bookbinding awl. And I want to do this for two reasons. One is that eventually I will be assembling the zine with string, so I will need to punch a hole here anyway. But the second reason is that I'm using this circle cutter. This orange, button thing pulls down an anchor point, and that is where you want to match up to the very center of your circle that you're going to cut out. This device is clear for a reason, so I can perfectly line this up. But the blade is actually here under this. It's like a very little blade, and you can measure your circle through this ruler, which I'm not going to move right now, but you'll see it's around 7 inches. So it lines up with the center here. The paper kind of shifts while you work, so I like to put down a really heavy book as I go. And then I am going to hold this down and then cut. All right, so we are finally done cutting the little circles out of their papers. This part is the most tedious part. It just requires a lot of attention to making sure the blade is turning right in this trimmer. But yeah, there's at least like 20 or 30 books here and a lot of papers with a hole cut out in the middle. Not exactly sure what to do with these. Maybe turn them into scraps for collage, or sometimes I just really want to get rid of clutter, so I'll recycle it. But the next step, the final step now, or second to final step, is sewing the zines so they can be hung up. All right, so first we're gonna gather all our tools we need to bind our books. So of course, first we have the paper for the book, and I like to have it all folded up before starting the binding. So if you haven't done that, you can go ahead and do that. And then we'll need some needles, just one needle, preferably a wider-eyed needle, definitely wider than your average sewing needle. I have a collection here. If you look up bookbinding needles, you can easily find these, or embroidery needles could work as well. And then we have our thread. This is a waxed linen thread. I would say waxed threads are commonly used to bind books because it has a nice coating around all of the strands so that the strands don't come apart as easily. And I've pre-cut this already to be about the length of my one arm from my shoulder to my fingers. That's just the length I've determined that I needed for this project through some trial and error. But if you're working on your own, you can kind of cut more than less and see how it goes. And lastly, we've got a bookbinding awl. Not totally necessary because you could use your needle. It's just, an object with a sharp pointed edge, but it does help in terms of, the ergonomic grip you get, and it just feels satisfying to use. The first step that I'm going to do is grab my bookbinding awl, and I want to make 3 total holes along the spine of the book so that as the end product we can sew our thread through here, and then when we flip the pages it it can still hold and not flop around too much. So this is called a pamphlet stitch. It's probably like one of the simplest ways to bind books with thread. What I'm going to do is create about 3 equidistant holes. So for this I'm going to do it right above the moon sunglasses and then right below the smile. And then punching all the way through. I do this a bit slowly so I make sure I can stay on that edge, and then doing it on the other side as well. So I just want to make sure that there are 3 holes along that spine, and then I can grab the needle and thread and start threading. So I'm gonna first come into that top hole, that first hole, and go from the outside in. So this new moon part is my cover, and then I'm gonna go all the way to the inside fold, and then I'm gonna pull my needle through and leave a bit of a tail for the other side. So I'm eventually going to make a loop with my thread here so someone can hang the book if they want to, and make like a little bookmark. So I'm going to leave quite a long tail, but if you're following along for your own project, you can leave a much shorter tail too if you'd like. And then I'm going through in that second hole and then going back from the inside back out, so the tail comes back out, and then going back into that third hole from the outside in. So you're just kind of weaving along here and there, get in the thread, and then once you've made your way through that third hole and you're back on the inside, we go back into that middle hole and stick our thread through to come out the other side. And then we're out the middle, and then we want to go back in to that top first hole to complete the binding. So here we are, and then I can take my needle out, and the tails are pretty similar. If they weren't, then I would maybe pull through and do some readjusting. And I'm just gonna pull this taut just to make sure the thread is tight. And then I'm gonna make a simple double knot at the edge of this zine of the paper. That way the loop can hold tight and the pages can flip more easily for display. Alright, so I've got a little loop at one end, and then I'm going to make one more loop at the top, and that will give that nice long area for someone to hang it from a higher place. And there you go. Voila! So this length that I cut has it so that it's about the full length, so it could work as a bookmark if you wanted. So I'm just going to repeat that process for all of the books that I've cut. Alright friends, we are in the home stretch of this book assembly process. So here's a stack of 20 or so books, fully sewn and ready to be hung. But the issue with these is I want to create some kind of container for them to fold easily, and these pages are pretty thick. So what I was thinking was to wrap a belly band around them, especially because the pages also don't have any information about who I am as an artist and what the book is about. Usually these would be in maybe the inner pages or something like that, but in my case, since I wanted just a clean 8 pages for each moon phase, I decided to remove that option. So what this is going to look like in the end is a little wrapped yellow belly band around the folded book. You might have seen in wedding invites, but it's basically like a taped or glued piece of paper that wraps around the card or whatever internal paper item that it's hugging. And it usually goes somewhere in the middle of the paper, maybe the paper's belly. Perhaps that's why it's called a belly band. So to make these, I've already pre-cut some paper, but this was basically printed on 11 by 17 paper with a yellow and black riso, and then same circle cutter, I made little circles there so that when you wrap it around, it can perfectly show the little moon peeking inside. So for this final step, what we're going to do is get our book and the belly band, and I know usually books go like this, but since the moon phases actually go from right to left, I want to place my belly band folded this side, and once I get the placement right, making sure the text is over, I'm just gonna fold it internally here. Just a soft fold. And then turn it around, and you see this edge here where it overlaps. That's going to be where I'm gonna put some glue down. So I'm actually gonna take this out and then use a bone folder to get some nice crisp edges. And then this is a glue pen from Kuretake, I think. And I'm just gonna put some glue down here. And then that should seal it up real nice. So now that I have that belly band ready to go, I can put it around here, let that slide right in. And there you go. The very last step is that I've marked the number of books that I've made in this edition, which is 40. And so I believe I left off around 15 or so. So I'm gonna just mark the copy of this book that I'm making 16. And then as I'm making them, or perhaps at the very end, I'm going to just number each edition so people know that it's a limited edition. So there you go. I just gotta do the rest for all of these books. All right, I've officially finished all the zines. Very satisfying, also very sweaty now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for future content. And these will be in my shop if you want to check it out and support this work. I would so appreciate that. There's just 25 copies or so on sale, so be sure to check that out pretty soon if you'd like a copy of your own to hang. And I think my next video will be about aligning the moon phases and your creative practice. So stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. Bye.